So let's talk about HTTP messages. And you saw that HTTP is basically a way of client and servers communicating over the internet. Now, when they communicate over the internet, there's something called the HTTP message, right? So this is what is exchanged between the both. So messages, as defined in HTTP 1.1 and earlier, are human readable. And in HTTP 2, these messages are embedded into a binary structure, allowing for optimization. We have two types of messages. We have request and response, and each have their own format. Let's take a look at the HTTP request message. So the request is what is sent from the client to the server. So here, from the client, on this side to the server. And let's say that the client wants to get the picture. So this picture that I've showed you before, if the client wants to get a copy of this picture right here, it performs a GET request. So in this example here, you see that in the message itself, we have the method, which is GET, and we'll talk about these methods in a second. Then we have the path. So this is exactly the location of the resource that we are requesting and which version of HTTP we are using. Then we have additional optional headers. So the request consists of the HTTP method, usually a verb like get, post, or noun like option and head that defines the operation that the client wants to perform. So if we want to get a picture from our server, we want to issue a GET request. If we want to delete a picture from the server, we issue a delete request. And I'll show you a real example in a second. So typically a client wants to fetch a resource using a GET or post the value of an HTML form using post. Through more operations might be needed in other cases. The path of the resource to fetch, the URL of the resource is stripped from elements that are obvious from the context. For example, without the protocol, so HTTP, and I'll show you this in a second when we learn about the URL, the domain, so here for example, developer.mozilla.org, and the port is actually omitted if it's 80 or 443, the version of the HTTP protocol, and optional headers that convey additional information for the service. A body for some methods like post, similar to those in responses, which contains the resource sent. If this doesn't make sense, don't worry, because I'm going to give you real examples and you'll learn exactly how this works. So we have the request, then we also have the response. So the response here, you can see that we have the version of the protocol, then we have a status code, a status message, and these, they tell the client whether the request has succeeded or not, and also additional headers. What was the content type of the resource requested, the length, the last modified, the server, so Apache, remember Apache, Tomcat, and the date. So basically this is the request and response message. Before I give you an example, let me cover the request methods as well as status code, and then I'll show you a real example.